Hey everybody, welcome back to Paramistic Christina. I'm your host, Christina Bloom, and today I have with me my friend Larry. And Larry Eissler III is a filmmaker and a paranormal investigator. And we were talking uh, backstage, so to speak, about how the media and paranormal influence each other. But before we get to that, would you like to share anything about yourself?
Sure. Well, as Christina said, I'm a filmmaker and I primarily focus more on that aspect. I didn't always start in filmmaking. I was an investigator first and kind of fell into a love of filmmaking. And that's kind of my medium now. But I'm also an author and a historian. I have a bachelor's degree in history, so I'm an actual historian.
That's good.
There is a difference.
There's a
There is a
difference.
difference.
There is, yes.
But when people ask me to introduce myself, I usually use one of those three. Um,
Okay.
if they want some kind of a paranormal title, I always then go to paranormal researcher.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
and then my style of investigating, I call it more communicative investigating. I really don't care about the numbers. I don't care about the bells and whistles. I don't care about percentages or any. I don't care. I really don't care. I'm here to have a conversation with the spirit, and then I'm going to take that conversation. I'm going to see what they say and compare it to the history, and then I'm just going to keep trying to combine the two so we can tie the history and the spirit together. With the hopes of the history from the spirit now becomes accepted history.
Right. Right.
So
I've
so
been
I
noticing that trend in paranormal research and
yeah.
investigating, where people are comparing what they get with the history afterwards.
There are a lot of unspoken stories.
Hmm.
Um, people who either couldn't write very well or didn't know how to write, and they didn't have a journal or a diary or correspondence to leave behind. That story went untold. Well, now people like myself or yourself who have
Hmm.
abilities can now help us get that story out there. And then, if the spirit story has details that tie in directly to the accepted history, well, now it's a little bit easier to be like, well, yeah, actually, this person was there. This was their life. And these are details that we can now add to the record.
Yeah, I like that because one of the things that I've noticed, and I don't know if this is true for you or not, but what I've noticed is when I have spirits talking to me and
Mhm.
I'm at a location or whatever, um, I don't get the famous ones, you
Sure,
know? I get the ones that were the servants or the farm hands or, the children of the famous ones or whatever, but I rarely get the famous ones because their stories are always told,
sure.
so.
I I get a wide array of different spirits. When I did OBI with Nikki Wilson from Anik Paranormal, we did group investigations, like an event in the basement. That was our group. And I filmed that couple sessions down there. And during one of those, I was able to bring in Al Capone through the Estes.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
And it was a very long session, but from what I remember, she was asking for a name and I said Alphonse, which, for Estes, we're a good, 8, 10 feet apart and I've got all the stuff, right? So to immediately answer Alphonse was like, oh, that was actually pretty cool. And then there was a couple things back and forth that were just kind of chit chatty, like him and her talking. And then she starts going into the group telling them, hey, Al Capone, he didn't want to be known as a bootlegger or a racketeer. He preferred to be called a businessman. And right as she said business, I said business through
Okay.
the Estes. So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, maybe I really did bring Al Capone through Estes. But then at the same time, at OBI, upstairs in the brothel, I was bringing in the brothel workers. So I feel like, when I communicate with spirits, it's kind of all over the board. Whoever
Right.
wants to come in and chat, come on in.
Right. It's not like I haven't had contact with famous people, but for the most part, I get the deep stories
Yeah.
about the stories that haven't been told, you know?
They they mess with me. That's what I get. They're constantly messing with me. In the OBI video, it was only Nikki and I, so just us investigating in the building, in the brothel by ourselves. And she legitimately offered me up to these brothel women like a piece of meat.
Oh my gosh.
Like, here he is, ladies, come and get him. And they totally went with it. Like
Did you
their
know she
Estes
was going to
response,
do that?
we talked about it.
Okay.
And
I'm
she's
sorry.
like we knew the last session was going to be like me in the madam's bedroom. And
Okay.
we're going to see like what happens if I give them a couple dollars, because if you pay them, they'll perform. Um, but like as we were going, she just kept going like, "So are you guys ready for Larry to go back to the bedroom?" And they were totally like the spirits were adding into it. And I'm watching this back. I do the editing. I'm watching it back and I'm just like, "Are you serious right now?" Like, really? Okay. So, and then I have more Estes profanity than I know what to do with. Spirits that are calling me an idiot through me.
Okay.
It's like, okay, yeah, thanks. Appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. That's awesome. Wonderful.
Yeah, we're gonna be
Yeah.
great friends, guys.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this, but then that's why I brought
Mm,
up the topic. It's like how have the paranormal and filmmaking or TV shows or what, that platform basically, how have they influenced one another? Like let's start with filming.
sure.
How has filming influenced the way paranormal investigation is done?
So, let's look at this more as a timeline.
Okay.
We'll start with the early 2000s. That's kind of when the paranormal started picking up steam on TV.
Right.
Your Ghost Hunters obviously were going strong, and then you had other shows that were starting to pick up steam as well. That was really the introduction for most people my age and younger, were those TV shows.
Right.
Ghost Hunters in 2006 was, I think it was six or seven. That was my introduction to the paranormal in what we do.
Hmm.
Was Ghost Hunters. And a lot of people, Paranormal State, Paranormal Cops, there are numerous shows that was the first one they watched. They really liked it, and then they started looking into it more.
Right.
So you have what was really, a small sect of the population, all of a sudden because of paranormal TV growing into a much larger community. We are a community now.
Right.
Whereas before, we were barely a group. There's
Right.
not many people doing it.
Pretty fringe. Yeah.
Pretty fringe. Yeah. Now it's really accepted. Really accepted. So, and that's a benefit. More people, more openness, more stories being told. Um, People who, when they were a kid, my house was haunted and this is what happened. You those stories were hard to get because the older generations did not talk about it.
No.
They
No.
were, almost violently against talking about it. So, that's a benefit. And then as these shows came about and their audience grew, paranormal tech grew. So you have these devices and these techniques that are developed because of paranormal TV.
Right.
Um, I know because I'm writing about it in my book right now. The mentioning of the flashlight method.
Right.
Most people being introduced to the flashlight method is because of ghost hunters.
Hmm.
They didn't know about it before that. It was because they saw it on TV. How many pieces of equipment that are commonly used today first appeared on Ghost Adventures? It's a great way to introduce this stuff to the new community.
Right.
Um, and also a good way to introduce stuff that's kind of junk and doesn't work and had a very short shelf life.
Yeah.
I have a few of those.
Yeah.
They were so promising, and then when you actually use it, you're like, this thing sucks.
Yeah.
Like, why do I have this? So, all positive things, right?
Hmm.
Well, it's not all positive.
No. I was waiting for
There
you to get to that. Yes.
there does come quite a lot of negatives. So with the introduction of the paranormal to younger people, it now gives them more things to do to mess with each other.
Yeah.
Before, when I was a kid, probably when you were a kid, it wasn't uncommon to go to cemeteries and be like, "Ooh, this place is kind of spooky. We're gonna mess with each other."
Yeah.
But after paranormal TV came out, I feel like there was a surge in cemetery visits with teenagers, which often resulted in headstone damage
Yeah.
because they see on TV if you anger the spirits, if you antagonize the spirits, you're going to get a reaction. What better way to anger a spirit than to destroy their headstone? And they go and do it. And sometimes they get the reaction they want because cemeteries are haunted.
Hmm.
Sometimes they don't. And maybe they go to a different cemetery. Maybe they try again. Maybe they stop. Who knows? But for a lot of kids, paranormal TV was their first introduction to it. And then they wanted to go and do it too. And they can't go to these buildings, these asylums, these prisons. The only place they can go is the cemetery down the street.
Right.
And they're trying to impress a girl and they're all macho and kick over a headstone. So you have that. And then with the number of paranormal TV shows came a lot of people that wanted to be on TV too. And their sole drive was not the stories, not the spirits, not the locations. It's I'm gonna be on TV. I'm gonna be a celebrity. I'm gonna make it rich, and people are gonna bow down and pay for my autographs. I had quite a few friends back in the day, early 2000s, that they had, I don't remember what show it was, but they were interviewed for a location for like 5 minutes on the Travel Channel, and then they're selling signed pictures, autographed pictures for $5 a piece. And it's
Wow.
like you only want to do this to get on TV and to make money. That's not where you're supposed to be.
Right.
So a lot of people were that way for a long time, because streaming wasn't a thing,
Right.
really. Um, even when Netflix kind of started up, you know, people like us weren't on Netflix.
No.
28 Days Haunted was really the first major paranormal thing from what I remember. So everything prior to that, that wasn't our space. So Discovery, A&D, Sci-Fi, that was where we went.
Right.
And it's hard to get on those programs, those networks.
History too. I know the History Channel has a lot of those shows.
History has a
Yeah.
lot too, yeah. And I
Yeah.
think the ID channel has a couple,
Hmm.
like Investigation Discovery or whatever it is. So people started out with the intention of being on TV, and that was their sole goal. And usually those people with that intention don't have the proper way to go about things.
Hmm.
So they antagonize spirits. They sometimes can cause destruction to locations. And it just ends up not being overall very good.
I
My dog's
agree.
upset. Someone's upsetting my dog. It's the spirit upstairs. I kicked them out last night.
The spirit of the dog.
The spirit.
Okay.
Well, I was telling you about that.
Yeah, you
The spirit
were.
last night in my room, and I kicked them out at 3:43 in the morning. So maybe they're upstairs messing with my dog.
That could be. Could also be a squirrel outside the window.
Yeah, yeah, it absolutely could. Or a
Yeah.
deer. I live out, in the semi unincorporated area, so there's a lot of deer by us.
Yeah. That would definitely set off your dog. So yeah, those are some things that you pointed out that I've noticed too, is like everybody just wants to be famous, right? So they want to get on a
Yes,
show, they want to be famous. Oh, look, I'm on TV. Now I have an IMDb and I can add that to my list. And
right.
um,
Which I
it's,
can tell you, I have an IMDb. It has done nothing for me.
yeah, because nobody even thinks to look there anymore.
Nobody
Um,
looks. The only people that do are other people in the film industry.
right.
And unless you're working as a crew member, they don't care.
No, no, they don't. But I've noticed that too, is that there has been a surgence lately, I'm going to say maybe the last few years, about changing the dialogue around filmed paranormal investigations. Now, I don't know if that's
Mhm.
because of the streaming or if enough actual paranormal investigators and psychics and researchers jumped up and said, stop antagonizing.
So I think
Stop and
there's that.
so there I've
Um,
seen in lately I'm seeing more positive interactions, I guess, between
I think
investigators and
that's
spirits.
partly to due to your side of the community.
Yeah, this
Um, the more metaphysical side,
right.
the spiritual side, the more in touch with the light, the positivity side.
Mm-hmm.
Um, y- Maybe you could call them the old guard of the paranormal. The side that's been around for longer than paranormal TV.
Right.
And they're like, listen, we didn't do this 20 years ago. You need to stop.
Right. Exactly.
Um, and right, this is an example. You have a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And people who watch that podcast, my age or younger, are learning from that podcast and going, oh man, maybe I shouldn't provoke.
Right.
Maybe I shouldn't antagonize. Whereas before, the number one paranormal show was Ghost Adventures, and that's not the way to do it, but the TV showed results.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
um,
It's
and I'm happy because you should not be antagonizing spirits.
right.
Number one, you should never antagonize something that if it hits you, you can't hit it back.
Good point.
That's not a good idea.
I had not thought of it in that way, but good point.
Like if you're gonna get into a fight and somebody hits you, what are you gonna do? You're gonna hit them back. Well, you can't hit the spirit, but it can sure hit you.
Exactly. Yes.
Don't make it mad.
And it
Just be
can follow you
respectful.
home and
It can
continue
follow
to
you
cause
home.
problems that you don't know how to solve.
But it's not even you though. It can
No.
cause problems for your family.
Yes.
Imagine you've got a daughter who wakes up at 3:43 in the morning because something is standing outside her door, blocking the light from the hallway.
Yeah.
And because you pissed the spirit off, it's there because of you now.
Right. Exactly. And it
So,
can mess with your family, it can mess with your animals, it can, I mean, there's my big thing, the thing that I speak on when I go to Paracons is energetic self-protection. And number one
mhm,
rule is don't antagonize.
right,
Don't intentionally piss off things you can't deal with,
right.
and I don't think it's a good idea to even piss off other people if you're doing it on purpose, just to be
No,
antagonistic. But,
no. Well, and
you
that kind
know,
of plays into how toxic social media can be in the paranormal.
right,
You definitely
right.
don't want to piss people off in the paranormal because they will call you out.
Oh yeah.
It is not a good time.
No, no. If you're really into drama, it can be a little entertaining, but I'm not really into drama, so I'm not
Yeah,
entertained by it. I just scroll
yeah,
past it. But yeah, you can get hurt by antagonizing, and I think that that's one of the things people don't understand. You can literally be hurt by antagonizing spirits
yeah.
because you don't necessarily know what you're dealing with.
Right. There was one investigation we did, and it was for Expedition Entity. We were doing the Freeport Masonic Temple in Freeport, Illinois. It's like a city block building. It's one of the biggest buildings I've been in yet. And it had like 20 locations to investigate throughout the building. So we ended up splitting it into a two-part episode because it's just too much.
Right.
And we were there for like 20 hours trying to cover this building.
Wow.
And in one of them, I was in the theater stage area. It's like a 1,200 seat theater, and I was talking to two spirits that were on either side of me in the row. And Dan, my paranormal partner at the time, he had the thermal on me, and there's this big purple spot around me of cold. And we're, remarking about how amazing that is to one, get it on thermal, to two, feel the cold, and then to three, get responses through the SB7, like direct responses. Well, there was another spirit there that I was ignoring. I was so fixated on talking to these two guys next to me, I didn't want to talk to that other spirit yet, which ended up being the spirit of a little boy.
Okay.
So, I'm sitting there, my arms on the armrest of the chair, and all of a sudden, there's like a quiet moment, and you hear the SB7 go bite. And right as it goes bite, I look at my arm and I'm like, oh. I felt a pinch on my arm right here. And Sierra, the other investigator I was with, Sierra,
Yeah.
and she goes, that just said bite. And we go back and forth a little bit. She grabs her flashlight and looks at my arm, and there was a little ring, a red
Bite
ring on my
mark.
arm. And I'm like, did you just bite me? So, I didn't react negatively to it. I was more surprised, like, did you just bite me? And we got confirmation several times that yes, I got bit, but that was me ignoring a spirit.
Okay.
And it bit me and left a mark on my arm. Imagine what damage a spirit could do if you really push them.
Right.
Like if you really antagonized them or said some really down and dirty things, that's how you get scratched. That's how you get pushed down.
Hmm.
And you get seriously injured then.
You can get seriously injured. Yes, absolutely.
There
And I,
was one
yeah.
investigation I did with Scotty Rorick, where he wasn't antagonizing, but this spirit was a jerk. He was a cantankerous old dude in life, and he's a cantankerous old dude in death. You just leave him alone.
Yeah.
Just leave him
Yeah.
alone.
Just don't bother. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he picked up on Scotty. Scotty picked up on him, and Scotty isn't one to back down from a jerk spirit.
No, he isn't.
So, he was just like, listen, I'm here to talk to you. Why don't you want to talk to me? And he wasn't being disrespectful or antagonizing. He was just trying to get this guy to open up. Well, the spirit pushed him down. And I have pictures on my phone. There's a long gash on his hand that goes up to here, and then there's a gash on the side of his face because of how he landed on a stack of chairs.
I saw that picture. It was posted on social media.
I posted it.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
I
All
definitely
right.
put that out. And yeah, like the spirit pushed him down and just gouged him all up.
Wow.
And I'm willing to bet that they'll both probably scar.
Uh-huh.
At least the hand because that one was really deep. And like he wasn't antagonizing, but when the spirit was done, it let him know I'm done,
Right.
and it pushed
Right.
him.
I have been
So,
on investigations with a couple of people who had like they look like cigarette burns
mhm,
on their arms, and they faded within a couple hours. But you know,
mhm,
stop it. Stop antagonizing. Don't do
yep.
that. You
I I
know.
find I find spiritually inflicted wounds will go away in 3 to 4 hours. My little
Right.
ring on my arm was gone in a short amount of time.
Right.
But when they push you into a physical object,
Then you
that
get hurt, and
you're
it's a
getting
fit.
hurt.
Yes. Yeah.
You're getting hurt,
Absolutely.
hurt.
Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely. How has I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this question because it's the flip flop of the question I already asked.
Mm,
Like how has filming the paranormal changed for you as you've learned more about filming? Like what is
sure.
it that you look for when you're filming a paranormal investigation or a paranormal event?
Hmm.
How do you what are I'm not asking for all the tricks of the trade because you got to keep some trade secrets, but um,
Sure.
how has that changed for you? Like if you were filming just a normal TV show that wasn't paranormal, how
Mhm.
would that be different from filming a paranormal episode?
So, number one, paranormal's reality TV.
Right,
It's minorly scripted at best. Your interviews are partially scripted. Really, the questions, that's the script.
right,
And then sometimes you might have to do the answer 3 or 4 times because they want it to sound a certain way or be told a certain way. But for the most part, the answer is unscripted. What you say is what you say. Everything else is reality. It is as it is. However you encounter it, that's what we record.
okay,
Whereas, with a lot of other documentaries that are a little more scripted because you're trying to put out a specific message, you're trying to get a point across, or narrative that is 100% scripted.
right,
Um, that's really the big difference. Whereas, with the paranormal, there's no going back. We can't do it again.
yeah,
If I'm interviewing you for a documentary on, podcasts, if you say something and I'm like, hey, let's do that one more time. We didn't really sound like you got across what you wanted to. If we're investigating and you're talking to a spirit, I can't do that. Like that was our one
exactly.
shot. And if
Yeah,
I screw the shot up with video or audio, well, then it's gone. We'll never get it back.
Right.
So that's really the big difference between how paranormal and other film is. It's kind of a one and done. For myself, getting more into film helped me figure out what my style is. And it changed a lot in how I investigate. Because when I first got into the paranormal, I was here to disprove it. I was
Okay.
here to prove that the paranormal was fake. And boy, did I screw that up.
Yeah,
Because
good
I'm
luck with
still
that,
here.
buddy.
I did a poor job of that. So, of course, though, because I was so wrong, I swung the pendulum the complete opposite way. And now I have to prove it scientifically. I
Yes.
have to get all the reasonings and the theories and all the blah, 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 blah. And I did that for years. We had security cameras and numerous static cams and all the bells and whistles and all the stuff. And after a while, really, once we started filming Expedition Entity, um, I didn't need that stuff. I
Right.
didn't need all of this, for lack of a better term, junk to one, convey a place is haunted, and two, tell the story that the spirits want to tell, and then three, share the location with the audience. I
Right.
don't need all this stuff. So I started looking at the paranormal as less about a 8 hour scientific study where every single second is documented and every location and all this stuff, and more about specific targeted conversations to where if my camera is running and the conversation happens on camera, great, perfect. Here it is. Look at this amazing thing. If it happened off camera, it wasn't meant to be,
Good point. Yeah.
and just let it go. And that really changed a lot for me. So now I used to roll up to an investigation with four, five, six, seven cases of equipment, kind of like how Ed does.
Hmm.
I have one backpack now.
That
That's
does
it.
make it easier, doesn't it?
It makes it so much easier.
Yeah.
I have a Windows tablet because I love the Phasma box. That's my favorite app. It's the only app that I would venture to say is legitimate. Um, Necrophonic is maybe.
Okay.
So I have my Windows tablet. I have my Estes headphones, my Estes sleeping mask. I have two sets of Delco goggles because I love the goggles. The goggles kind of help me get into the right space. Um, K2, I have a JBL speaker if I want to use my SB7. Um, and then a couple REMs. I'm working on a tripwire. I will get a tripwire eventually, and a couple of the small odds and ends and stuff that I can't think of. But a lot of that I'm not using to like, okay, so the milligauss for that hit was 19 milligauss and it hit for 1.2 seconds. I don't care about that.
Okay.
I'm using it more for ITC. I'll
Which
put,
is
oh, I can never remember what it's called.
for those of us who don't speak filmmaker.
I do not remember what it's called. It's in the book that I'm writing. Let me see if I could find it real quick. It, oh no, where is it? It is instrumental transcommunication.
Okay. All right.
That's why I couldn't remember because it's such a mouthful.
It is a
Um,
mouthful.
yeah. So you use normal devices like a K2 as a way
Hmm.
to communicate. So my style is communicative. I'm looking for a conversation in everything I do. So dowsing rods are a great way to communicate
Hmm.
if you can think out of the box to get different responses with different movements. But K2s, set two or three K2s down and say, this K2 means yes, this K2 means no, and this K2 says that I didn't understand the question because you asked it wrong. Do it again. And just be like, start asking questions. Yes, no, you're dumb. Do it again. Yes, no, and then going back and forth. And if you run an SB7 at the same time, what happens if the SB7 says yes and the yes K2 says yes? Well, now that could be something there, right?
Right.
So it's I'm communication based. I'm driven for stories that I can then take to the history and apply it and say, hey, this is what the spirit told me, and it's been successful. So there's a location in our book, the Ghost of the Black Hawk War, where the first battle site is in Stillman Valley, Illinois. It's a monument site. It's really beautiful. But not that far from there, Major Isaiah Stillman set up his camp. And technically that's where the first death of the war occurred because Black Hawk had emissaries come down, they were going to surrender, and then they were executed in the camp. Well, we wanted to find the camp, but there's no record of the camp existing.
Okay.
So if there's no historical record, what's the next best step? Ask the spirits.
That's right.
And the spirits pointed us in the right direction. We got there. We have a couple SB7 hits where one of them, Dan asked the question, what did the Native Americans do to the soldiers on the hill? And the SB7 goes, scalped. Like, okay, well, that's neat. So now we're going to metal detect the hill. And if we can find a button, a buckle, a piece of horse tack, and if that dates to, early 1800s to late 1700s, we know that we're in the right spot, and that conclusively could be the hill. So the spirits helped us find this location that was never recorded before,
That's
all
amazing.
through communication.
That's
So,
amazing. And as a psychic medium, communication is obviously what I use as well.
sure.
Um, it's interesting because I now have a spirit box because my husband gave it to me for my birthday. But before that, I had no paranormal equipment,
Sure.
just me. And
Sure.
I find it interesting how often the two actually do correlate.
They do. They
Yeah.
do. And people don't always understand why the spirit box works.
Hmm.
And I'm talking the SB7, not the S box or any of the other ones or the apps, just the SB7 in this case. So there's two trains of thought. Number one, it's the spirits amplifying the sound from the radio station to get a word through all the noise.
Right.
That one I don't believe.
Okay.
It's not probable.
Right.
You know,
I've
because
always wondered about that because, how do they take static and turn it into words?
right.
Yeah.
So, if let's say we're using AM stations at the medium speed 200 milliseconds in reverse. Well, they're going in reverse in order. So you have to get five or six radio stations. They're all saying part of the right word to get a response. It's
Okay.
just not probable.
Right.
So it doesn't make sense. But if you think about it, how did in the movie Poltergeist, how did what's her name, the little girl, communicate with her family when she was on the other side?
I actually don't remember. I know I saw the movie years ago, but I don't remember.
It's through the white noise of the TV.
Okay.
And there are a lot of cases where spirits do communicate through TVs and white noise and white noise generators. Well, isn't the underlying audio of an SB7 just white noise?
Right.
It has a very audible noise floor. It's that sound.
Hmm.
That's where all your spirit responses are at.
Okay.
So I think the spirits are coming in underneath the radio noise in that noise floor at the bottom there, that white noise. And people are adjusting the SB7 to a point to where the little sound isn't covering up the responses, but we're also not getting interference from the radio words.
Okay.
And that's why, you can get a 5, 6, 7 word answer over 10 radio stations because it's not the radio station itself, it's the noise under the radio station.
Okay. So would that explain then, as an example, years ago, I was living in an old farmhouse
Hmm.
and it had been chopped up into three apartments. My landlord at the time lived in one of the apartments. I lived in another one. Well,
Hmm.
after he passed, I was working and I had the air conditioner on. It was a window unit. And all of a sudden, I'm hearing the Brewers game coming through the air conditioner.
Yes. So that air conditioner hum would be the white noise.
Would be the white noise. And at
Yeah.
which case I was like, Bob, please take that in the other room. I'm trying to work.
Yeah.
You know? And then it
It's just
stopped.
like a
Yeah.
frequency that our ears pick up on.
Okay.
And everything in the spirit realm is frequency vibration. Everything.
Yes.
So how they hijack these frequencies, I have no idea. I
Right.
That's a Chris Fleming question. He is all about that. I just know that it works.
Right. Right.
So, and then the same thing with the apps.
Mm.
The Phasma box doesn't really have words. It has noises. It has tones and sound effects and echoes and reverbs and stuff like that, which echo and reverb can help make responses easier to understand.
Mhm.
Especially if it's a short, quick response, it kind of elongates it a little bit. Um, but I think it all comes in underneath all that stuff.
Okay.
So,
All right. So now I have another question because it just popped into my head and that's the way I work. So,
hmm.
um, have you ever used like a reel-to-reel recorder
a,
to
a
pick
tape
up?
recorder,
Yeah, like a tape recorder.
I did once. So tape recorders have a very high noise floor.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's that shh at the bottom of the waveform.
Right.
Um, they can be difficult to find stuff in. Um, but the guy that was using it, he was able to get some really good stuff, even audibly, just with your ears, without even putting headphones on.
Right.
So,
Okay.
is it better than digital? I can't say that.
I was just wondering if you've ever used one and if you'd noticed the difference.
Just once.
Okay.
Usually those cassette recorders don't have the greatest microphones,
Right.
and that's why you get a lot of that noise floor, is because the sweet spot is a lot higher up in the waveform.
Okay.
Whereas now with digital recorders and much better microphones, we have 24-bit, 32-bit microphones that extend the sweet spot much lower into the waveform, and we
Okay.
actually get into the noise floor, which means we're able to pull responses out easier with
Okay, that
less of
makes
that annoying
sense.
part.
That makes sense. I mean, I'm just starting to learn about like, like audio editing and I haven't even gotten close to like, the video editing even for my own videos. Like that just
Sure.
boggles my mind. But
It's a chore. It's a chore.
trying to make it look seamless. I don't know how y'all do it, but I have not gotten there. Let's just put it that way.
Lots and lots and lots of practice.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
lots of failures. I will say that. A lot of failure.
Yeah, I have definitely still pretty high on that failure list. And I understand it's a learning curve. And I
It
also
is.
understand that you have spent years doing this. And of course,
Many years.
many years doing this, you're going to be much better at it. But it's just really interesting, like the noise floor. I hadn't really considered that phrase.
Yeah. And a lot of TV shows forget this, especially on YouTube, which kind of is a whole nother part of the whole filmmaking side of the paranormal.
Because we're all
Um,
using our phones to do it.
we're all using our phones to do it.
Yeah,
Or even if you have a very nice camera setup and a microphone setup, you're still the editor.
right.
And if you're not a very good editor or a very experienced editor, you're gonna make decisions that aren't a good idea. And
Yeah, I can
season one of
vouch for that.
Expedition Entity has those mistakes. I'll say that. Um, when we were doing investigations and you have isolated audio for myself and Dan, I completely removed the noise floor altogether. It's gone. It is bottomed out. You only hear us talking and then silence, talking, silence. And at the beginning, I was like, "Oh, this sounds pretty good." Now we know there's no annoying background audio hiss. Until I was talking with a film professor like a year later, and he's like, "Why is there no background audio, no ambiance?" And I'm like, "Well, it's because it was just all hissing and whatnot." And he goes, "Yeah, but now your environment sounds really sterile, and it sounds like you're because everything is so dark. It sounds
Right.
like you're just in the vacuum of space."
Good point.
And I'm like, "Oh, I never really thought about it like that." A lot of other paranormal people on YouTube make that same mistake. They completely remove all that background audio and everything just
Okay.
sounds weird.
Yeah.
It's a little off. Or they'll try to
Yeah.
bury it in music and the music is way too loud because they
That
don't know how to reduce it.
I find that really annoying when the music like drowns out even the human voices.
Yeah.
That I
Yeah.
find that annoying. So I tend not to put music into mine because I'm not real good at the mixing yet. So, yeah.
Yeah. For what I did for Expedition Entity, the interviews, the B-roll, that had sound effects and a little bit of music, intro and
Mhm.
outro, all that. Anything that was investigation, there was no sound effects, no music. It is whatever audio is existing in the space at the time. So
Okay.
if I'm hearing it, that means you're hearing it. You don't hear spooky music when you're investigating.
No.
Why would I add it in?
Good point.
So
Yeah.
that's the way I look at it as a filmmaker. But obviously not everybody does because Ghost Adventures has all of their risers and their crashes and blah and all that stuff because it's entertaining.
Right. It isn't. Well, and that's the point, right? Because that's entertaining. So,
Yeah.
where do we draw the line between paranormal entertainment and paranormal documenting?
So that is in the eye of the beholder. It's,
Okay.
it's in the audience.
That's
You have
fair.
to
Yeah.
you have to decide for yourself, what is the intention of what I'm watching? What are they trying to do? Are they trying to entertain me or are they trying to educate me?
Yeah.
And how do I view that as that thing? You know, yes, Ghost Adventures does have some educational bits,
Yes.
especially a new location, a new piece of equipment, a new technique, yes, that could be educating. But how many new locations do they go to?
I don't know because I can honestly tell you I've never seen the show.
They quite often go to locations that have been done numerous times.
Yeah.
Um, Now that Zach's got a little bit more money, he can find more of the off the beaten path locations. But a lot of the locations were all the penitentiaries, the prisons, the asylums, they hit all those.
Right.
So, that is more education based because I can go to that spot. I'm
Right.
just here to be entertained now.
Right.
Whereas, the stuff that I did were locations that most people have never heard of. So now I'm learning about the location for the first time and realizing, oh, I can contact that person and now I can go investigate there. Now I can go to Broadhead Manor and spend the night and get beat up by the principal
Right.
or get choke slammed by the janitor.
Yeah,
And it's
I
just a different
fortunately have
purpose.
not had those experiences. So, yeah.
I, I got aggressively hugged by the janitor.
Okay.
It was interesting. And then Jen got really affected by the principal
I s-
that
I did see
investigation.
that episode. Yeah.
Yeah, she had a hell of a time. And I always like telling this story, especially at the conferences I go to, where I give the presentation for our most haunted, is, even though we investigate in front of the camera, so what you see is what you get, it's still a show.
Right.
So there are still some principles there. If I'm not in front of the camera as the camera operator and the director, I don't exist. I'm not supposed to exist.
Right.
Dan was absolutely the worst about this rule because he'd always be like, "Did you hear that, Larry? Like, stop talking to me. I stop it." Always do that. So, in that setup in the principal's office where the couch was, we had Steve on one end of the couch, and then I had two cameras in other spots to cover everybody.
Right.
Everyone on the couch is covered except for Steve because he's the camera operator, and sometimes you get the short end of the stick. But there was nowhere for me to stand that was not being covered by a camera. So, off camera before we recorded, I'm dancing around the room trying to find a spot that I could watch what was going on out of the way but not be seen on camera. And I just happened to find this little tiny nook right next to the TV stand between a camera and Steve where I was completely off screen. And I'm standing there and I'm just like, okay, well, that's only for 10 minutes. I could stand here. It's fine. And as we go, Jen starts getting kind of like
Yeah.
checked out, she gets a little loopy. She stands up, she takes one step forward and then partially faints and passes out and falls forward into my arms. The only spot that I could stand is the spot that caught her. If I
Wow.
was not in that spot to catch her, her face would have hit the corner of the entertainment center.
Oh, that would not be good. Yeah.
So, and I tell the story at the conferences I go to, there is a strong likelihood that she could have died that night.
Hmm.
And whatever reason, guides, angels, whatever, I got put in the one spot to prevent it. But, then you see me walk out with her and I'm now on camera, and that's the only time you really see me on the show for that episode. But
Yeah.
like yes, things happen on camera the way they're supposed to for the investigation, and sometimes things just go south real quick, and
Exactly.
and you got to roll with it. And that's now the story for the show. Like Jen almost died. Jen almost died.
Yeah. That is the story for that episode for sure.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. And then she just kept getting picked on the whole rest of the night.
Of course.
It's a lot of old-timey spirits that do not like alternative women. So, nose piercing, hair dyes, leather wearing,
Tattoos. Yeah.
tattoos, not a good place.
Yeah. Got it.
So, but for your audience, Jen has gone back several times since then. She's fine. The spirits like talking to her. It's just those cantankerous old dudes that are very set in their ways.
Right. And you were in their space,
You were in the principal's office, his
office. Yes.
space.
His space.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And he
exactly.
he did tell us to leave, and Bill was like, "Why do you want us to leave?" And then he made Jen pass out. So just leave.
Just
Just leave.
leave. Yes.
Just
When
leave.
spirits tell you to get out.
Just go.
Just
Come back
go.
later, maybe.
Yeah.
But for that moment of time, if they're like, I'm done, just
Yeah.
go. Just go.
Yeah. This has been an incredible conversation. I feel like people are going to learn a lot from it.
I
And
hope so. I hope so.
yeah, yeah. Do you have some contact information you'd like to share, or if anyone is looking for someone to film a documentary or
Sure.
anything like that?
The best place to find me is on Facebook. Larry Eissler 3. I've got the blue check mark. That's how you know it's me. Um, I'm super easy to communicate with over Messenger, if unless I'm busy doing a podcast, which
Right.
I've already gotten like 8 messages while we were doing this. Um, I get back pretty quickly. Um, and then from there, you go to my about, and then you can get my websites. You can see some of the stuff I've done before. You can get my YouTube, and I'm constantly posting on Facebook when Facebook lets me.
Right.
Right now we're battling because Facebook thinks that I'm doing stuff that's spam because I'm liking and commenting too much.
Yeah, I get that a lot too.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So, but I'm also on Instagram lightly. I'm there. I exist. Whatever.
Yeah.
And then mildly on TikTok. I'm there. I exist. But really, Facebook's it.
Okay.
And if you're filming something, you want to get a hold of me, shoot me a message on Facebook. We can talk about it briefly, and then if you want to continue forward, then do a Facebook Messenger call, go through the details. Because most of the time people aren't able to meet up anymore
Right.
because they'll be like, "Hey, I'm from Tennessee. I want you to come down and film something." Okay, well, I'm not going to drive to Tennessee, so let's do this on Facebook.
Yeah. Let's do a video call. Yeah,
Yeah. So
definitely.
that's the best way. And then even on there on my website, you have links to my books, Ghost of the Black Hawk War and Afterlife Anthology. And then sometime this summer, I have a new book coming out through Mike Ricksecker, and it's going to be called, hold on, The Ghost Hunter's Guidebook: Tales and Techniques from the Field.
Oh, very nice. That'll be a very
So
helpful book for people.
yeah, I
Excellent. Yeah.
I sell starting ghost hunter kits at the conferences I go to. And once I started doing that, I'm like, there should be a book in this that kind of explains this stuff. So I wrote the book. And then it
Awesome.
became like a whole much bigger thing that I originally planned. I'm up to 50,000 words now. And I'm like, 15, 20,000, that'll be a good starting point. 50.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So,
As an author myself, I totally understand what you're saying. Yeah, it just takes
yeah,
on a life of its own.
it does. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I kind of want to rewrite this. And now it's 3 pages longer. Oh, well, okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and then you start adding pictures in, especially because if it's a guidebook, and I'm talking about a K2, This is what the K2 looks like. This
Yes.
is what dowsing rods look like. This is what,
Yes.
you need pictures. And that just makes a much larger book too.
It does because it takes up space.
Takes up space.
I totally
So,
get that too.
so yeah,
Uh, Awesome. Well, Larry, thank you so much. It's been so much. It's always fun talking to you, and I know you've been on our other my other podcast, Red Road Paranormal as well.
yep.
So, but it's always fun talking to you, and you've always got some great stories to tell. So, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks, everyone, and I'll catch you next time on Paramystic Christina.